Holiday Special.
Hello and welcome to
Stop
Theme
touching
Park
things.
History, the channel for everything to do with...
Harrison Ford as Han Solo.
Hello and welcome to Theme Park History, the channel for everything to do with theme parks. Old and new, big and small. In today's episode, we take a flight to the moon of Endor as we explore Star Tours, a motion simulator attraction that opened at Disneyland on January 9th, 1987, Tokyo Disneyland on January 12th, 1989, Disney's Hollywood Studios on December 15th, 1989, and Disneyland Paris on April 12th, 1992. This attraction was suggested by all these peoples whose midichlorian count is off the charts, over 20,000 to be specific, so thank you to everyone for the comments. As always, if there's any attraction you would like us to cover in a future video, leave a comment down below. You never know, your suggestion might be next month's video. Inspired by the Star Wars film franchise created by George Lucas, Star Tours had guests join R2-D2, C-3PO, and rookie pilot Rex on the ultimate adventure to a galaxy far, far away, ripping through the fabric of space at hyperspeed. Known as the first attraction based on a non-Disney licensed intellectual property, Star Tours was one of the most popular and important attractions ever created for Disney parks. Featuring an original story set within the Star Wars universe, its ride film created by Industrial Light and Magic, and utilizing military-grade motion simulators as its ride system, the attraction was 300 parsecs ahead of its time. Before he ruled the Disney Empire with absolute power, Eisner was the president and CEO of one of Disney's rival film studios, Paramount Pictures. During his 8-year tenure from 1976 to 1984, the studio produced various #1 box office hits, such as Saturday Night Fever, Grease, and the Star Trek film franchise. Of all the films that were released during his time at the studio, the one Eisner took most interest in was Raiders of the Lost Ark, developed by George Lucas. The film was initially rejected by every major movie studio due to its large $20 million budget, but Paramount would eventually agree to finance the film. The change of heart was because Eisner believed that the movie had the potential to be just as popular as Lucas's other film, Star Wars. The gamble would pay off, as Raiders of the Lost Ark would become the highest-grossing film of 1981 and turn Indiana Jones into a franchise, leading to 3 sequels. When Eisner came over to the Walt Disney Company in 1984, one of his biggest tasks was to rejuvenate the aging theme parks by adding modern attractions that would draw teenagers and young adults, a demographic Disney didn't place much focus on. Eisner would reach out to Lucas to see if he would be interested in helping to create these attractions. Eager to partner with Disney and get the intellectual properties owned by Lucasfilm into the parks, Lucas would agree to a partnership with the company starting in 1986, becoming the executive producer for the 4D musical film Captain EO. While Captain EO was a huge hit featuring pop star Michael Jackson in a unique original story, Lucas had already envisioned plans to bring the epic space opera opera he created to the happiest place on Earth. While both Disney and Lucas were excited to create an attraction based on the franchise, the original concept pitched by the filmmaker was completely different than what eventually made its way to the park. The original pitch by Lucas was to create an epic indoor dueling roller coaster located within Tomorrowland. Guests would have chosen either the light or dark side of the Force, encountering characters along the way as the forces of good and evil clashed. However, due to the size and scale of the roller coaster, the project would be dropped, as Eisner wanted attractions that could be created in a short time frame. Imagineer Tony Baxter would propose a concept for the attraction, one that almost came to life a few years earlier. First planned for the proposed Discovery Bay expansion in 1976, Baxter and fellow Imagineer Charles Bright began work on a motion simulator attraction to be themed around the adventures of Captain Nemo. However, due to the technology being too primitive and costly, the project was dropped. Imagineers would look at the motion simulator ride system once again when developing an attraction based on the 1979 Disney sci-fi film The Black Hole, but due to the movie bombing at the box office, this concept would also be dropped. Baxter proposed the concept to Eisner and Lucas, stating that not only would the motion simulator be perfect to mimic the movement of what it would be like to travel in space, but the attraction would be very easy to reprogram, allowing it to be updated with new locations and stories every few years. Lucas loved the concept and agreed to a deal with Disney to create the Star Wars attraction, giving Lucas a percentage of the merchandising fees from the ride, as well as a $6 million fee to create the ride film for the attraction. Construction on the attraction at Disneyland would begin on September 3rd, 1985, replacing the Omnimover attraction Adventure Through Inner Space. The ride's story, written by show producer Tom Fitzgerald, George Lucas, Tony Baxter, and visual effects artist Dennis Murin, would take place after the events of Return of the Jedi, having guest board an intergalactic touring company loosely inspired by classic Hollywood bus tours, visiting the iconic locations featured in the trilogy. Other ideas pitched for the ride's story were an underwater cruise through the swamps of Dagobah, and a time travel conceit that would allow guests to go anywhere they wanted in the Star Wars galaxy, but both were scrapped for being too overwhelming and complicated to portray during the ride. To help further the ride's story, Lucas came up with the idea of having a droid be the pilot of the spaceship guest would be aboard. Envisioned as a grizzled and brash veteran of the Clone Wars, the droid's personality would change during production, as Baxter felt the character would be too intimidating for families. Instead, the android would be a timid, nervous rookie on his first flight. To bring the droid to life, Fitzgerald would hire Paul Rubens, better known as Pee Wee Herman, to voice the character. Besides Rubens, Anthony Daniels would reprise his role as C-3PO, not only voicing his character, but acting out the entire pre-show, so Imagineers could shoot reference footage that would later help the programming of his audio animatronic counterpart. The figures of C-3PO and R2-D2 in the queue are actual props from the original film, modified to operate via audio animatronics, and the G2 droids are the animatronic skeletons of two geese from the closed attraction America Sings. Lucas and his team of special effects artists at Industrial Light and Magic would be responsible for the ride's film, approaching the shoot just like they did for the trilogy, shot on 70mm film and using practical models, miniatures, and computer-controlled cameras. The 4.5-minute, $6 million ride film was one of the most challenging ILM had worked on, as unlike in the movies where they could cut to different shots, The ride film had to be one long point of view, due to the audience only seeing what was directly in front of them. Most of the film would be shot in large uninterrupted takes, with ILM finding strategic places to make subtle cuts that would go largely unnoticed by the average rider. For the motion simulator ride system, Disney purchased 4 military flight simulators at a cost of $500,000 each. The 26,000-pound Atlas cabins would be attached to 6 hydraulic actuators that provided 6 degrees of freedom, including the ability to tilt 35 degrees forward and backward, side to side, and left and right. The ride film was casted onto a screen from a front-side film projector at 30 frames per second for flicker-free images. When both the ride film and simulators were completed, Imagineers programmed the simulator's movement to mimic the action taking place on screen. With the price tag of $32 million, Star Tours would officially open at Disneyland on January 9th, 1987. On hand for the grand opening were Eisner, Lucas, and many characters from the franchise, whose performance could be described as being just as good as the Star Wars Holiday Special.
That's it, I'm turning back.
To celebrate the monumental occasion, the park would host an interplanetary launch event, which was a 60-hour party where Disneyland remains open from January 9th at 10 a.m. to January 11th at 10 p.m.
Star Tours announces the arrival of the Endor Express. Once we've had a chance to service the Star Speeder, we'll begin our boarding procedures. Thank you.
Located within Tomorrowland at Disneyland and Tokyo Disneyland, Echo Lake at Disney's Hollywood Studios, and Discoveryland at Disneyland Paris, the story of the attraction takes place after the events of Return of the Jedi, the galaxy now free from the tyranny of the Galactic Empire and safe for travel. Guests make their way to the Star Tours travel agency, which offers leisurely interstellar flights to various destinations all across the galaxy. As they pass through spaceport THX 1138, guests view a giant screen advertising trips to different planets, along with the Star Speeder 3000, which will be their means of transportation. Repairing the Star Speeder are C-3PO and R2-D2, who are now employed by the travel agency after it gained the support of Alderaanian captain and Rebel Alliance member Ramus Antilles. Guests pass by the spacecraft and head into a droid repair bay, where an unproductive G2 droid performs repairs on another, while a disgruntled droid talks down about the travel agency, pointing out all the supposed flaws of both the Star Speeder and its RX pilots. Out of the maintenance bay and into the loading station, guests discover they will be boarding the Endor Express, a non-stop flight to the forest moon of Endor, the site of the climactic battle where the rebels were finally able to vanquish the Empire. After watching a safety video, guests board Star Tours Flight 45, destined for Endor, which can hold up to 40 passengers. Once all guests have fastened their seatbelts and turned off any portable electronic devices, the flight's pilot, an RX series pilot android named RX-24, or Rex for short, appears on a video screen in the cabin. As R2-D2 is loaded into the Star Speeder's astromech slot, Rex informs the guests that this is his first flight as a commercial pilot. Promising a smooth ride, Rex lowers the cockpit shield to reveal himself in the spacecraft's front window. With all final pre-flight checks completed, Flight 45 for Endor is cleared for takeoff. Instead of heading to the launch bay, Rex makes a left turn, crashing into the maintenance bay doors. Unable to find the Star Speeder's brakes, the ship plummets into the maintenance yard. but Rex pulls up at the last moment, narrowly avoiding colliding with the control tower. After exiting through an open hangar door, Rex is finally able to get the ship into space, where R2-D2 makes the jump to light speed. Instead of arriving at Endor, Rex comes out of light speed too late, completely missing the planet only to encounter a field of icy comets. While attempting to avoid the comets, Rex pilots the ship into a large opening in one of them, sliding and scraping through icy tunnels. With a burst of power, the ship is blasted out the other side. Confident that the worst is behind them, Rex assures guests everything is under control and they'll be on their way to the Endor moon without any further delay. This is far from the case, as the Star Speeder is caught in a Star Destroyer's tractor beam. A transmission from a New Republic X-Wing fighter chastises Rex, as the Star Speeder is in a restricted combat zone, urging the droid to ease up on his main thruster to escape. Free from the tractor beam, Rex tries to fly his way out of the firefight between the X-Wings and TIE fighters, but the ship is shot down by an Imperial fighter, causing it to lose altitude. Per Rex's orders, R2-D2 repairs the damaged stabilizer in time, somehow finding themselves in an all-out assault on the third Death Star. Rex and the guests join Red Squadron in its attack against the massive Imperial battle station, following two X-Wings through a giant trench. Rex uses the Star Speeder's laser cannons to eliminate several TIE fighters, allowing for a Republic pilot to fire two proton torpedoes into the Death Star's exhaust port, destroying it in the same manner as Luke Skywalker did, jumping the light speed before the battle station completely blows up. The Star Speeder heads back to the spaceport. Just like with takeoff, Rex once again has trouble landing, nearly colliding with a fuel truck in the hangar, but finally figures out where the brakes are in the nick of time. Rex apologizes to the guests, reminding them that it was his first flight and is still getting used to his programming. Before he can continue, the cockpit shield raises and C-3PO appears on screen, hoping the guests enjoyed their tour and will return soon. Guests disembark from the Star Speeder and head into the Star Trader gift shop, where merchandise from the attraction and film franchise is sold. The 4.5-minute attraction was an immediate hit with guests, as many praised the ride's theming, story, and modified flight simulators to make it feel like they were part of the Star Wars universe. The immediate success at Disneyland led the Walt Disney Company into duplicating the attraction at other parks, including Tokyo Disneyland and Disney's Hollywood Studios just 2 years later in 1989, and at Disneyland Paris, opening with the park in 1992. While the ultimate Star Wars adventure was a huge hit at various Disney parks when it first opened, fans of the attraction were hoping something more only a few years later into the ride's operation. Star Tours was designed in mind to be easily reprogrammable, allowing it to be updated with little to no hassle. According to Lucas, the idea behind this concept would allow for the attraction's story to change every few years, allowing guests to visit different locations all across the galaxy. While no official reason was given to why this concept never came to fruition, one theory is because of how popular the attraction was. Disney felt there was no need to spend money on updating it outside of maintenance and annual refurbishments. While the attraction would remain unchanged since opening in 1987, Lucas would approach Imagineers in 1998 with the hopes the travel agency would finally offer guests new flights. In conjunction with the release of Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, Lucas proposed rebooting the ride's story, with passengers now traveling to Tatooine instead of Endor. Upon arriving on Tatooine, passengers would take in the sights and sounds of the Boonta Eve Classic, an annual pod racing competition. While everything would go according to plan at first, eventually chaos would ensue and the Star Speeder would somehow end up in the race. Besides the changes to its story story and location, the ride's film would now be in 3D, with guests wearing glasses made to look like Anakin Skywalker's goggles. The reboot of the ride's story would only make it as far as the storyboard, as Imagineers saw a major problem with Lucas's proposal. While the attraction was in need of a major update, changing the ride's story to only focus on the first movie of a brand new Star Wars trilogy would make it outdated very quickly, as the 2 additional movies to be released would feature more new locations and characters.
Hello there.
Most likely leading to fans demanding Disney to update Star Tours to include them. Instead of just creating a new story focusing on Episode 1, Imagineers decided to wait until Episode 3 went into production in 2003 before starting work on rebooting Star Tours. During a Q&A session at the Star Wars Celebration 3 in April 2005, Lucas revealed production on Star Tours 2 had begun, and on September 12, 2009 at the D23 Expo, Disney officially announced that Star Tours would close in order to begin a total renovation of the attraction, slated to reopen as Star Tours 2 in 2011. Star Tours would officially close at Disneyland on July 27, 2010, and at Disney's Hollywood Studios less than 2 months later on September 7th. A special event, The Last Tour to Endor, took place at Disney's Hollywood Studios on August 14, 2010, exclusively for Star Tours Celebration 5 attendees. The shutdown ceremony featured characters C-3PO, R2-D2, Boba Fett, and Darth Vader in attendance to power down the attraction. Instead of R2-D2 simply shutting down the ride's power supply, Boba Fett would destroy it using a thermal detonator. Details about the reimagined attraction, including a name change, were revealed on June 11, 2010. Now known as Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, it was revealed the ride's story would now take place between the events of Episode 3 and Episode 4, acting as a prequel to the original attraction, having guests travel the galaxy in an early Star Speeder 1000 model instead of the 3000. Just a few months later in September, the biggest news about The Adventures Continue was revealed. Instead of just one ride experience, the new ride would now feature 54 possible different experiences, now featuring locations and characters from across all 6 movies. Besides the changes to its story, the ride system also received a massive upgrade, replacing the 70mm film with a new digital high-definition film, a Dolby 3D high-definition projection screen, an improved motion simulator, several newly added special effects, and audio animatronics. Star Tours, The Adventures Continue, would officially open at Disney's Hollywood Studios on May 20th, 2011, and at Disneyland 1 month later on June 3rd. The attraction has been met with rave reviews from guests, praising the ride's immersion due to the new upgrades and randomized encounters, making sure no experience is the same. The attraction would win the Most Outstanding Attraction Refresh by the Themed Entertainment Association in 2012. Following the success at Disneyland and Hollywood Studios, the Tokyo and Paris versions of Star Tours would follow suit a few years later, closing in 2013 and 2016 to properly update the attraction. The attraction would officially open at Tokyo Disneyland on May 7, 2013, and at Disneyland Paris on March 26, 2017. Disney wasn't finished updating the ride's story, as it was announced at the 2015 D23 Expo the desert planet Jakku from Episode 7, The Force Awakens, would be added to the attraction, becoming available for guests to visit starting on November 16, 2015. The mineral planet Crate from Episode 8, The Last Jedi, and Batuu, the remote outpost forest and mountain planet from Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, were added on November 17, 2017, and the ocean moon Kefbur from Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, was added on December 20th, 2019. With these new additions, the attraction now features over 10 locations and 15 characters spanning across 9 films, which is impressive in itself. Having guests travel to these iconic planets while encountering the most well-known characters from each trilogy, Star Tours, The Adventures Continue makes sure any generation of Star Wars fan, whether old or new, can experience what it would be like in a galaxy long, long ago. For over 3 decades, Star Tours has been one of the premier attractions featured at various Disney parks all around the globe. Either in its original form, where now as the adventures continue, the ride has featured innovative technology and storytelling that brought George Lucas's iconic characters and locations to life, making it the perfect example of how to not only create a unique ride experience based on a beloved franchise, but also expanding on its lore as well. If there's one thing certain about Star Tours, it's that guests will never know where the Force will take them next. So that is the theme park history of Star Tours. As always, thank you for watching the video and supporting the channel. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and if there's any attraction you would like us to cover in a future video, leave a comment down below. Once again, thank you for watching, and until next time, remember, Han shot first. Don't let Disney or Lucas gaslight you into thinking anything else. Greedo did nothing wrong.